All right. So we'd like to welcome you all to the Athens Women's Football Summit conversation today. It's a cross-cultural conversation. We are talking about culture, community, and commercial growth. My name is Maggie Ntim, international sports agent, CEO of Trinity 3 agency, and I'm joined by these two amazing, trailblazing women, GMs. For those that don't know what GM stands for, general managers, Maggie Murphy of Lewes FC and Alyse LaHue, the GM of Sky Blue FC. Thank you, ladies. And if you both would take a few moments to just introduce yourselves.
Sure, I'll go first. So great to be here. Great to join you guys across the pond. So I'm the general manager here at Lewes FC. I don't know whether we want to dig in yet about what that actually means, but basically we have a women's setup here that is in the second tier of English football, so in the Championship. So we're in the same league as the likes of Liverpool, Leicester City, Crystal Palace. So even if you haven't heard of us, you might have heard of our competitors.
Awesome. And Alyse?
Yeah, I'll go by Maggie today too. It seems to be a trend. So just feel free. Anybody, call me Maggie, I'll answer. But Alyse LaHue, I'm the GM for Sky Blue FC in the National Women's Soccer League here in New Jersey, New York area. And same. Let's we'll dig into the details as we get into this chat. But I've been a GM here since 2019, but I've been around NWSL for a long time. I was the GM of the Chicago Red Stars for I think 5 years. So I've been around women's pro soccer in the US for quite a while.
Amazing. And can't wait to dive in. But before we do proceed, we definitely want to thank the Athens Women's Football Summit for doing this and putting this together. And we want to thank the team and the staff and the co-founders, Marios, Sulu, and everyone behind Athens Women's Football Summit. And so, ladies, I want to get into it, okay? And so the first question I ask is, what is the role of a GM? And if you can define, what does that look like for each of you? What's your day-to-day like?
Yeah, so for me, I find this one of the hardest questions to answer. And that's because it feels like it's kind of anything that's not quite making decisions on the pitch. Anything can be thrown at you. But I try, if I was pretending that everything's really organized, I would try and group it into purpose, people, and process. That makes me sound like that I'm really organized. But basically, the purpose is setting the strategy, setting the business plans, and also making sure that people are behind your ambition and believe in what you do. And that's communication with your players, for example, as well as the staff. When it comes to people, yeah, I oversee the contracts of the players, not necessarily too much scouting, but definitely a lot of the recruitment and overseeing the contracts and what we do, and also with staff and staff development as well. And then process, honestly, this is probably the bulk of the job, and it sounds really boring, but my role is really to make everything as efficient as possible. And the reason for that is I don't really have any time. I don't have any time to waste. So there's financial management, there's dealing with the FA here in England. In order for us to maintain our license, we have a lot of requirements that we have to fulfill. And I'm talking from floodlights to gate attendances. So a lot of my time is spent trying to hit those targets that we're set in order to maintain our license or pitch for a license, perhaps for the top tier. So that would be me saying in a really structured way what I do. But honestly, anything can come at you any day.
Amazing. And Alyse?
Yeah, I think Maggie kind of, covered its broad stroke. I think there's a traditional general manager that maybe is handling more of the oversight and management of the technical side. So player acquisition, might be some scouting, definitely the contracts, handling the technical staff, the hires there. I think that's the more traditional GM role, but I've actually never had that role specifically. I've always oversaw the front office as well. So I see my role as very broad stroke. In a lot of ways, it's almost like operating as like a president, a GM, a CEO. It's really, I'm in charge of revenue at the club. If we don't, pull our revenue numbers, we sync. So I feel very strongly about being able to manage that process. And day to day, it would take too long. Every day looks different. That's actually why I love this job so much. There's a lot of things thrown at you, like, just thinking through my day today, I get to sit on this panel. So that's cool. That's a cool start. I'll be onboarding a new staffer right after this panel. I've got some interviews later for another job. I've got a meeting with a sponsor later, a prospective sponsor. This morning, we had a player lock her keys in her car, so I handled that while she went to training.
Wow.
Every day, a little bit. We had a toilet flood in the locker room again. So I did that too. I've got some, light plumbing background apparently. So every day is a little bit different. And there's always a fire to put out.
Like exactly the same day that I had yesterday. How funny.
It's not weird. The keys, the toilet. I mean, it's like, there's always a fire to put out. I'm just walking around like, spraying. And then like, sometimes I get time to actually breathe and try to be, fully productive and looking to the future. But yeah, every day is a little different, but I like it.
Amazing. And so it's interesting because you both talked about, your role and, that it's not the typical GM role, right? And so my next question, and this is probably perfect to segue into that, do you think it differs because you guys are with independent clubs versus if you were with a major club being a GM, the description of the role would be just a little bit different. And so if you could kind of walk us through what, like the status of independent clubs and your role and how that affects that.
I reckon on a really honest level, if I did, I could technically, as a general manager, do the tasks that are in my job description. But I think I think we have to point out that there is like a certain amount of personal drive and belief in the project that probably means that myself and Alyse will stay a little bit longer and end up taking on responsibilities that maybe we weren't asked to, but everyone's very happy for us to take on. But yeah, I think the really interesting thing, say from a Lewes perspective, is we have a lot of freedom as a kind of independent club, i.e. No team takes preference over the other. So here I am in Lewes FC, which is quite well known for having an equality stance. We treat our male players the same as female players. And what that means is that I'm quite different from my opposite numbers in other clubs where they might be the women's section, but within a bigger Premier League club,
right.
Bigger championship club. What that means for me is that I just have freedom. So when I think about match day, I'm in charge of match day and trying to generate revenue for match days, and I can just be a little bit more flexible because I'm not being held to somebody else's KPIs. It's not like the men's side of the club saying we need to hit these targets. I can just be a bit flexible, and so it allows me to step back a little bit and think, well, hang on a sec, we make roughly the same amount of money on a match day, men and women, at our games, but the men make it very differently to how we make it. So there is a lot more money on the bar on the men's games, but we might spread out the money through other parts of the ground. And that's really useful information because I can play with that and try and change, or we can try and bring in new innovations, or just basically just be flexible. Whereas sometimes I think that my opposite numbers are a little bit held back and restrained because they rent a ground, and within that ground they don't necessarily own the food outlets or the bar, so they're kind of just inheriting somebody else's setup. So I think for me, the independence allows me to have flexibility, and for the club as a whole to have flexibility in how we might want to run things. That's a big thing for me.
Amazing. And Alyse, how is your experience with, an independent club?
Yeah, I mean, we're running solo. I mean, even to differentiate from what Maggie said, we don't have a men's team here. We're not a line item on, a larger professional team. We are the entire P&L. So I manage the process top to bottom. And as we continue to grow and look at sort of peripheral business, it's all coming under our heading, which is cool. So I think that's what's most unique about being an independent club. Again, you're not just a line item on a larger sort of men's budget or men's P&L for the club. We're super independent. Now, I will say, of course, with that comes some lack of resources at times. We don't own our venue. We don't own our training facility. Those are really big line items, and they're hard to reduce the expenses on when you don't own those. Whereas, some of my colleagues in the NWSL, they're part of an ownership group that owns an MLS team. There's a lot of economies of scale in that. You can have staffers that do both teams, right? So it's sort of a pass through for the women's team. You're going to have more access to, communications and videographers and production. Whereas for me, I have to hire them outright, and it's just for our club. So I think, to go back to one of your earlier questions, I think as my role, and I don't want to speak for Maggie, but in my role as a GM, I have to take on a lot more, I think, out of necessity, because we are an independent club on our own. We're not fully able to staff up to the levels of a lot of organizations that have a men's and a women's professional team, or an MLS team and an NWSL team. So some of it's out of necessity. I certainly have a 3 to 5 year plan where I hope that's not the case anymore, but some of it just is out of necessity right now, having to take on a little bit more.
Okay, perfect. And I mean, you both talked about so much already, right? And Alyse, you brought up a great point about saying that you're completely solo. There's not a men's side, whereas for you, Maggie, there is a men's side. Being independent clubs, being GMs, of course, being amazing women, how does that affect the business relationships, right? I know, Alyse, you touched on there could be a huge lack of resources. So how does that affect the business relationships, especially from the commercial side, like the different sponsors, different, whether it's venues, like you mentioned, how does it affect those relationships?
I think one thing that Alyse has touched on is the hustle. You just have to hustle for stuff, for sponsorship, for opportunities. I think sometimes I do get jealous of my opposite numbers, because I kind of maybe unfairly think that their job when it comes to getting resources is just they have to convince the chair or someone on the men's side of the club to give them more money, whereas I have the full backing of the board. We are a club that's at our maximum, so if I need to get money, I have to go somewhere else to get it. So I think that is quite different in a business sense. You have to go out and find people that believe in you and want to back you. And I think that probably means maybe putting a positive spin on it. It allows us to have a personality. So as a club, we have a strong personality because we can't just be a corporate conglomerate that already has very corporate sponsors. So I think that maybe that might be a parallel between us and Sky Blue as well, in terms of, okay, well, we have to have a personality because we have to go out and get that money and get people that want to buy in and believe in what we're trying to do.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I see that as, an advantage for us in a way. We haven't been fully able to tackle it yet, but it's part of a, multi-year plan that I have here where, when you're buying into Sky Blue, you're buying into Sky Blue, a women's professional team. That's who we are. It's not a larger, massive club with multiple entities. I look at some of my colleagues around the league, and certainly, again, there's sort of that economy of scale where I look at some other clubs in the league and I have mild jealousy. Orlando's got a big healthcare sponsor on their, across their whole club, men's, women's academy. It's on the front of all the jerseys. I think, Portland just got TikTok. That was a club-wide sponsorship. That's men's and women's team. So I think there's just, again, it's kind of that economies of scale when their sponsorship teams are going out. They've got kind of a package of assets that I think they're taking to every sponsor. But I look at it as a benefit. I think right now the time is ripe for investment, certainly in women's football. We've seen tremendous growth. I think there's certainly a lot of hype around the NWSL, certainly of the women's league in England as well. It's so accessible in the US right now. So I think I'd say the same. For both of our leagues, just in the way we're growing, and that there's just a lot of cool factor around women's football right now. So I think a lot of sponsors are looking for that space to enter, and it's kind of nice to be independent because we can provide that to them. We're in a very big media market. I think I just in my head said the sky's the limit, and I stopped myself, but I have to say that out loud because it's so embarrassing. So I was going to try to think of something else to say there, but that was a terrible pun. But I think
that's exactly it. Sky is the limit.
It's embarrassing, but did catch myself.
Sky
Give me credit for catching it.
Limit. Listen, Sky is the limit, okay, and especially for sky blue. So
You guys, it's Friday, so this is as good as it gets verbally for me at this point. But yeah, I think there's just tremendous upside, and for sponsors that are looking for that space, we can provide it. We're just one club with a women's professional team right now, and we can provide that. And I'm sure we're going to get into more of the business stuff, but the time is ripe for investment in women's football, and I think the return on investment has proven to be great.
absolutely, and I mean, I love it. Honestly, I love it. Being an agent representing women in NWSL. Having a player that plays in like FAWSL, it's exciting, you know, and I'm a huge advocate for women's football. And so everything that you ladies are talking about, I'm constantly preaching. So I'm like, ditto, 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 ditto. So we do have some questions that have come in. So I would love to take a moment to at least try to answer a few questions. We have a question from Jim Gooley. He says, for both of you, Maggie and Alyse, does ownership have a hands-on approach, or do you have autonomy in your operations? It's a very good question.
Okay, so for us at Lewes, this is a little bit different. So we are a 100% fan-owned club. So anyone around the world can become an owner of Lewes FC. We do actually have a bunch of owners out in the US that, so hi to those guys. The way that works is that they elect our board of directors. And so because we're community oriented, a lot of our decision making is made with community in mind. So even for the fact that we don't accept gambling sponsors, for example, and that's partly because of our commitment to, like community purpose as opposed to kind of profit. So then when you come to the directors, that they are elected, and so obviously all of our directors are owners because it only costs £40 to become an owner. They are very hands-on, so they are they're involved in the operations on a daily basis or a weekly basis, and they kind of have to be because we are a small scrappy club, scrappy in the most professional sense, let me say. But yeah, so we have to get stuff done, and so that means kind of rolling up the sleeves and everyone being a part of that. We don't have huge numbers of staff, so there are certain areas of the business where directors will lead on to take that forward. So our model is a little bit different from the classic ownership model that, say, Alyse has.
Yeah, so thanks for the question. Hello, Jim. He's local to me out here. So yeah, owners here at Sky Blue, we've got 4 of them essentially, and they are very hands-on. One in particular that I speak to every day, all the time. He's texting me during this actually. So we're always getting checked on. It's a good thing though. He's a good dude. So yeah, they've got frequent hands-on and a lot of say. At the end of the day, I'm going to be honest, it's their say over mine. But they certainly value my input and my say. So there are things we've been combative on. There are things that have been decided that I then went and said, I know you decided this and it took you a long time to get to this conclusion, but here's my feedback. And that doesn't always go over super great, but I feel that it's my role. If you're going to put me in this role, I've got the experience in the background and I'm going to say what I feel, or maybe it's the fans are giving me feedback on something that they see coming and they want to have a greater say in it. And we don't have a fan ownership model here. I actually would like to. So I'm jealous of Maggie's model, unless the fans vote on me and my job, and then maybe I don't want it. But if it's just a board, that sounds fine.
Yeah, they don't vote on me. I haven't seen the banners come up saying Murphy out yet.
I know. I was gonna. That's weird. We have a Murphy on our owner, so we might have the same thing. But cut that part out of this video. So if I go sign up to be an owner at Lewes, I don't have a say in your day-to-day, do I, Maggie?
No, you don't. But I definitely get lots of feedback and information and ideas. Yeah, but not in my day-to-day. I mean, we have 1,600 owners, so across 34 different countries. So if all of them were communicating with me all the time, I wouldn't be able to do anything else. But no, I mean, what we do, I guess, at the club is we have regular kind of online town halls now through COVID. In fact, a bit of a silver lining from the pandemic was just that without ever thinking about it previously, we used to hold our forums, our fans' forums, in the bar, in the clubhouse,
Mhm.
in Lewes, in the ground. And so obviously everyone that was local walked down the street, came along, but then we weren't really hearing or serving or listening to or connecting with our fans or owners that are in Japan or we have a new ownership group in Japan. How cool is that? Or in Australia or Chile or the US. And so actually the pandemic forced us to put that online, and suddenly we were getting all this engagement from around the world, which is really cool and also quite validating, because a lot of those people will never come to a game. But the reason they signed up is because they believe in our principles and our values, especially on equality and on those other kind of community social projects. But yeah, they don't get to tell me, they don't get to line manage me, not 1,600.
I was gonna say, I do that without having paid. I'm surprised you haven't sent me the link yet to be like, hey, where's that 40 pounds?
I'm probably pretty bad actually at promoting. So everyone that's online, including you guys, have to become an owner as a result of this.
Yeah, good one. There you go. Now we see the salesperson.
I was going to ask, I need to figure out how to get into, Lewes and Sky Blue at some point. Don't know if that's possible, but
I'll just send you my Venmo. We'll talk once a week.
Yeah, we need to figure that
fan
out
ownership?
because that's like a lifelong dream of mine, to be an owner of, a women's team, even if, as a minority owner, yeah. So we have to figure out how this, and the thing is, it's like, I love both teams, so it would be hard to choose one, but if it's possible, and technically it should be able to work because it's across the pond, so maybe we'll find some loopholes there.
Maggie will send us the links right after this. I have no doubt.
/owners.
Okay.
Be one.
Perfect. Okay, so we're going to get into the next question. This one is going to be more so for Maggie. This is from Natalia de Cuba Romero. Thank you for the question. What are some examples of how the women's side at Lewes brings in revenue? And I think you may have touched on that a little bit, but...
Yeah, sure. So obviously we have all the normal facets of running a game. So we take a gate receipts, and we generate a fair amount of money inside the ground on match days as well, because of all our cool food and beverage offerings. But then on top of that, our ownership model gives us an interesting revenue line. And we see lots of people joining and becoming owners, again, because of that quality stance, because our women are in the championship. And that's been... a big boost for the club as well financially. But there's other interesting elements, like our live stream this year. We asked only for donations because obviously the fans are not allowed in at the moment, and that's been really cool actually, because it doesn't generate huge amounts of money, but what's happened is we've had, again, large numbers of people from all around the world watching. So one of our games quite recently, just against Durham, again, not a big name team, but we had people from 27 different countries watching that game. And remember, we're second tier in England. We're not the top tier. Right. So there's definitely that interest and that thirst for women's football. And long may that continue, obviously. I think the last big element for us, we've managed to bring on board a really significant sponsor just before Christmas, and that's the fashion brand Lyle & Scott. They've been a brilliant partner. They came on board very specifically, for two specific reasons. One was our equality stance. They love what we're doing with the women's team, and they really wanted to back us and help us really push through to the next level and really try and help us professionalize and make those next steps. And then the other element for them was the community side. They're quite a quirky, cool, trendy fashion brand. My wardrobe has definitely improved since they've joined. And they've just been fantastic coming on board and helping to create some content and some nice videos that they've created about us, about our story, about women's football. And that's been a really, for us, that was a huge lifeline in many ways. And again, hugely validating, because that sponsorship came through in the middle of a global pandemic. So those are the kind of main areas of sponsorship and revenue that we've been able to generate.
Amazing.
Are you now paid partially in sweaters?
A little bit. In fact, my partner at home was like, when do I get any gear?
It's a perk of the job.
Yes, big perk. And it's interesting, because we were talking about, before we took on this question, we were talking about like ownership and owners being a part of like, Lewes, obviously, Marios, and co-founder. So the co-founders of Athens Women's Football Summit are also, part of that ownership group. I'm jealous, but
wait, I have a question. I'm sorry to go ahead of the
sure.
that are watching. Maggie, what is the difference between a large and an XL? I was creeping your website.
Wait, which
while
Maggie
you were
are
talking.
we? Which Maggie?
Sorry, Maggie Murphy, the membership. There's like multiple memberships.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So it's a little bit of a pay what you can model. So
Okay.
because we value all of our owners equally, we haven't actually tagged on that you get extra corporate benefits for doing this or for that. So so most people come on board as a £40 a year. You could become a lifelong owner if you want. Feel free.
I saw that. Very cool.
I need to really take a look at this. Really take a look at this.
I creeped the website quick, so just in case I had any questions, which I clearly did. So
as soon as you said that, I was like, oh no, don't check the website just yet. We've got a really beautiful website being launched in April, and I'm so excited about the new website. So everyone can go now, but just remember that it's going to be better.
April.
So do we. Are you copying me again?
I thought you were copying me.
I actually am pretty frequently, to be honest. Like, what is Maggie up to now? Because I want to copy it. It's true.
No, I love it. It's amazing. So one of our next questions is when finding sponsors, well, this is coming from Ben. He says, when finding sponsors, to what extent do you consider ensuring you don't have too many sponsors and risk devaluing the brand? That's a pretty good question. And so, Alyse, if you want to start with that one.
I'm kind of chuckling on the inside at that because I'm not there yet. I'm gonna throw that out there. I don't have too many sponsors. I will tell you that now. I think the most important thing is trying to find spaces where you can be more exclusive in categories. If I can get 4 banks that are all going to pay, I'll take the 4 banks. But at the end of the day, I think there's some, charm in the exclusivity for partners. Like we have an insurance partner, a medical partner, they get kind of exclusive space around that. And for us, we really want to give them a massive return on their investment. We want to over-deliver, under-promise, over-deliver. That's always the MO for us as we approach sponsorships, because we want them feeling so good after that first year that they can't wait to come back. And we're going to continue to re-up every year and hopefully at a greater investment because they're seeing such a great return on it. So I think for us, I'm certainly not at the too many sponsors phase yet. And our league dictates how much sponsor placement you can put on the jerseys. I think we've seen some other leagues around the world. It's like sponsors all we call it the race car driver look, where there's sponsors everywhere, but our league dictates how many we can have. They've actually grown. We've added a couple new sponsor places on our jerseys. I don't feel it's overdone yet. We have 1 on the front. We have 2 on the back now. And we have this sleeve. The league gets the other sleeve. And then if you fill all those, I think you can put 1 patch on the shorts. So that's actually...
So maybe 5, 6 tops would be your max for as far as jersey sponsors. Yeah,
club level, we basically have 4 now, which is great. We used to only really have 2 because the league used both the sleeves. So that's great for us. They're really some of the biggest revenue generators for us. So I'm comfortable with that. I think if we keep adding stuff year after year, there was some interest because of COVID. We struggled. We've had such catastrophic financial losses. There was certainly interest for us to develop new revenue opportunities, and the jerseys, some of the prime placement for that. So I think we're okay. I feel comfortable with where we're at right now in terms of sponsor placement and what we can do. But I like having some of that exclusivity for partners, so they really feel special as part of the relationship.
Agree, Maggie.
Yeah, I think the only other thing to add, again, we're not turning down those and those sponsors, but I think the other thing for us is that the brand really has to chime with what we're trying to do, our principles and those values. So, for example, the last couple of seasons, Lyle and Scott are now currently the brand on our shirt, but in the last couple of seasons, we actually held it, and we did have approaches, but we didn't feel like they were the right fit from certain companies, and we actually thought that the shirt front was so important to us that we would rather hold it back. And in one instance, it's pretty well documented. We were approached by a gambling company, as I mentioned, and instead of putting the gambling company on our shirt front and taking their money, we actually put a local charity on the shirt fronts. And it was a charity that specifically supports those who have lost loved ones to gambling related suicide. And that was kind of our way of going, this is where our value lies. And yeah, of course, like it, you know, for some people that would have been quite a difficult thing to do. If the money comes and you haven't thought through what you stand for and what you believe in, then you probably just take the money and figure it out later. So I think that for us was important. And yeah, I think that kind of enshrines everything we think of as well.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with what you both said. As someone who has, you know, worked in sponsorships for years, it's so important that it's authentic and that it stays true to the brand. And so, Maggie, I think you touched on that as well. And Alyse, you hit it right on the nail in terms of exclusivity. I think sometimes people feel like, let's just go get 20 sponsors and don't even realize you may have 3 sponsors within the same category when you really could just have one and create that long-term partnership. And it's something that's exclusive and it grows into, you know, a multi-year partnership. And yeah, I agree. I think the exclusivity is always good. And so, yeah, you ladies, I'm excited to see more sponsors, honestly. I preach it every day that they need to get into the women's football game because they're missing out so much.
I do think that the return on investment is there. Like it still surprises me. I mean, anytime we do have a partner, you know, they, like Alyse said, they feel good. They feel really happy with it. And, I think there's just a little bit more personal contact somehow. There's a little bit more, I don't know, some kind of feeling that sometimes I think in some of the big men's leagues, it's become so corporate that there's maybe the maximum thing you can do is get a corporate box or something. Whereas I think with women's football, soccer, we're able to be a little bit more connected somehow. That sounded really like flimsy, but you kind of get what I mean, right?
Yeah, I think there's an experiential element too that with our partners. Am I on? Oh yeah. I think there's an experiential element, like, you know, for us with our larger partners, it's, again, I use the word partnership. I don't use the word sponsorship because it's a two-way street, right? If there's something that we didn't write into the contract that they really want later, like, just call me. You know, we want to have that sort of two-way street with our partners, and we like when they're promoting us and they're really invested and they want to see us shine as well. Those are going to be the best partnerships for us, and those are the ones that, you know, take nourishing and take a two-way street between us. And maybe you go off the contract a little bit here and there to be able to, really deliver on some interesting and experiential assets that are really going to resonate with the fans.
Amazing, amazing. All right, so we have another question from Natalia. She said thank you for obviously answering her original question. And then she asked, is there a lot of crossover among fans at Lewes, for example, in the USA with the women's national team and the American Outlaws? They really support both the men and women's side. And she says, Alyse, what is your fan base like for Sky Blue?
So just quickly on the Lewes model, so we get roughly the same attendances. Yeah, in fact, they were more or less equalized last season on the men's and the women's sides. And there is crossover, but not at 100%. I don't know, sticking my finger in the air, it would be about 20%, 30% crossover. I think that the two audiences are, because the match day experience is actually quite different on the men's side and the women's side. And so sometimes people prefer one or prefer the other. So the men's games are a little bit more traditional, a little bit more old school. People that granddads that go with their sons and their grandsons, and they've always gone and they've always stood in that part of the ground. And then on the women's side, we're a little bit more testing and piloting things. So we have like a local drumming society that come along to games because they're connected to bonfire societies. Lewes is really well known in this part for big bonfire celebrations, which is another story entirely. But we'll also have a band and things like that. So people will come to that. But every so often you do hear people go, oh, you know, I prefer this atmosphere or I prefer the other atmosphere. So there's some crossover, and that's, you know, it's difficult to explain in a way. I'd like there to be even more crossover. That would be my aim. I'd like to get even more crossover.
I agree.
But it's not necessary.
Agree.
Yeah, fans of Sky Blue. I mean, I've been amazed by the fans of Sky Blue's resilience. I mean, this club has been through it, up and down, through history, and we've got fans that have been around for a decade or longer. And I think since I've come in, the most important thing for me is actually to listen to them. And it just took a lot of conversations, and people had a lot to get off their backs when I first came in. And it took those really difficult conversations, whether they were one-on-one or in groups, to be able to hear their needs, what they were missing from the club. They just want to be a part of it, right? Like, this is their club. It's not mine. It's not the owners. I don't ever feel that way. I feel like a club is of the community, and it's of the people that support it and want to be a part of it. So I think from that perspective, since I've come in, we've tried a lot of different initiatives just to make sure that we're hearing them. I can speak most recently. We've done a lot more surveys around different initiatives that we're doing. I held the first ever forum with Cloud9, our supporters group. I think it was about a month ago. And I don't know why it took me so long to do that, honestly. I think it's just because of COVID, we started to learn to use video more frequently, whereas before I would have always thought we had to do things in person. The video is so easy to do now. And I thought that was extremely fruitful for me to just hear them out and listen to them. And I was very honest about what was happening at the club. And then we actually had 3 focus groups over the last couple days on a topic that we're brewing on at the club. And it was so enlightening. It was awesome. It was really cool to just have, it was only 10, 11 people per group. So everybody got to talk on it. It was peaceful. Everybody was nice, but they shared their viewpoints. They disagreed on stuff, and it was really cool to be a part of that and to hear that out. So these are the types of things that I think are so crucial as we move forward, because we have a tremendously diverse fan base over a really large region, to be honest. We've got New York City fans, New York, Jersey, Central Jersey, South Jersey, Philly, Connecticut. I mean, we've got fans from all over that have all different backgrounds. So I think it's important to have these platforms to be able to hear them. And a final piece that we're launching is actually a fan council, where we're going to have, I think we want to keep it intimate, almost like the focus group, but about 15 people per year that we do probably like quarterly meetings. And really it's just me soliciting their input on the club and to be able to have these intimate conversations about where they would like to see the club go.
Amazing. No, I really like that.
Is that in addition to like fans forums, like broader ones where anyone can come along?
I haven't done a lot of like open large fan forums. We don't have the ownership 1,600 owners like you do. Luckily, I only have 4 to deal with. That's hard enough. I don't know how you do 1,600, but these are kind of new initiatives for me. I've always just been I like to be the people's GM. Like, I'm accessible on game days and anybody can come up and talk to me, and I'm on all of our online events and things we do. But these, I'm trying to get a little more intimate, where it's smaller numbers, where people really feel like they have a consistent voice and can filter information. And our supporters group will have a certain number of seats on the fan council, and we'll rotate members either yearly or every other year. So I'm trying to get more platforms where it's like kind of smaller numbers, but that Cloud9 forum that I did, I think had about 80 people on it. And I thought it was really productive as well. I thought it was a good conversation.
Amazing.
It's not 1,600. I don't know how you do that.
they're just the owners. No, I mean, but it's interesting, the fans forums and how you strike the right balance around the topics. Because, a lot of the time you might end up going down a rabbit hole around a particular player or a manager or whatever it might be, and then you might be like, but I really need to talk about this. This is the bigger issue. It's fascinating how it works.
All right, and so our last question from a panel side, and we'll probably take about 2 more questions from the fans and from guests. We talked about, what your role is like being a GM, obviously being a female and, being a woman GM. So you have to work twice as hard. We also talked about business relationships. We talked a little bit about the commercial side, but now we get into culture and the community. And if you each can walk us through what that looks like, how important is, both of your clubs and your roles, and making sure that your clubs are involved in the community as well as your players being involved in the community as well.
Yeah, so here at Lewes, I think we really need to understand our place. I think for a long time, we're here and we almost hope and expect and demand people to come on match day, and we want them to put our posters up, and we want them to come along, but come to us. And I think that the pandemic was quite good for us in terms of taking a step back and realizing that we can reverse the roles a little bit. So at the beginning of lockdown 1, so a year ago, we set up a network of support for the community. So we were doing medicine drops. Our first team players were doing medicine drops for people in the community. We've done a lot of work with the food banks, which unfortunately is only increasing as an area of work in this town. We've kind of we've done free school meals for kids that maybe couldn't afford them during the breaks. So it's almost like we've switched a little bit, where we're like, oh, okay, well, the community has been keeping us afloat for years, and now we want to kind of help and give something back. I think that ultimately, if you've got a strong community, you're going to have a strong football club, and vice versa. As long as there's no kind of poor management or whatever else, I think that it's a really healthy, important relationship to have. That's what I sense here. When it comes to players, I'm constantly humbled and amazed by their willingness to be involved and take an active role. They were doing the food bank work with us. They just recently set up their own committee to start working on various activations. So they ran a really cool Big A bingo night a couple of weeks ago and raised, a couple of $1,000 for a charity that looks after the LGBT community, and specifically around mental health issues. And that was entirely run by the players. It was brilliant. I was like, great, I'm out of here. I don't have to do any of the supporting or organizing. The players just led by themselves. So, and I think that connects back to our club and what we stand for. And I think we attract and support players that want to feel like they're part of something bigger than just a football club.
Absolutely. And I know, Alyse, with Sky Blue, you guys, have always been one of my favorite clubs within the NWSL, primarily not just because of the players and you, of course, but because of the work that you guys have done in the community, especially in the local New Jersey area. And so can you touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, if you could just replay what Maggie just said, we've got it covered, because I almost verbatim can say the same thing, to be quite frank with you. Maybe we should have gotten somebody a little bit different than us two, Maggie, because I think we can just speak for each other.
I feel bad about me going first to answer all the questions.
No, it's fantastic, because I'm like, yes, yeah, same.
Great minds think alike. That's why. Great minds think alike.
Yeah, on the community side, it's who I am. So naturally, I'm going to do things I like to do. I think that's just natural as a leader, and you have to be natural and authentic in who you are. And I'd like to be a part of the community. I've always liked to give back. I started a nonprofit many years ago around youth girls that didn't have access to football. It's such a big part of the things I like to do, and I think it's really important. I never take for granted where I'm at or what I'm doing. So I think it's crucially important to use my sort of privilege and position to be able to give back to others, whether it's other women that want to enter the industry or girls or boys that don't have access to football or sports. I think there's so many mechanisms by which we can create relatable platforms for each other through our community endeavors. So I just try to lead by example, honestly, and that's my most authentic way I can lead. And I've same boat as Maggie. In the last couple months, our players came and said, "Hey, we started a player community outreach committee." I'm like, so over the moon. I nearly can't speak. I'm so excited. I was like, oh, thank God. Like, you guys can help, set your own meetings. They've got things going on. And right away, they set up a meeting. They asked me to come on to help them, but I let them lead it. And it's super, I think Maggie used the word humbling. It's really cool to see the players take initiative, reach out to organizations, set it all up, run with it. So just a couple weeks ago, we did a COVID food relief day with a local organization where our whole team went out and we packed up, I think, some obscene number of pounds of food over a couple hours one morning. And it was so fulfilling. It felt so good to get back out and do something in our local community, had another player on the committee come up to me this morning and said, hey, I've talked to the school district. We got a call next week. Can you hop on with me? So I'm just here to help facilitate in the background where they need some help, but otherwise they're running with it. And they created an internal newsletter for all of us. That was really cool. We had some fans that were, safely COVID tested come out and help on the volunteer day. So those are the types of things where it's like, it has to become the blood of your organization. It has to be who you are. That I firmly believe that, because we're more than just football. We're more than just, I always say, just chasing a ball around on a field. It has to be bigger than that and more than that. And I think too that the way we connect to the community is how we're going to grow this club. And I imagine that's how you grow Lewes as well, Maggie, is through these initiatives where we're really part of the fabric of the community, not just playing a game on the weekends.
Perfect. Yeah, I love everything that you both said about, community, culture. I myself am very big on that, very firm. It's a requirement even for me to sign players to my agency. So I stand with you ladies both, and couldn't agree more. So we are coming close to that time, but we do have a few minutes for one more question from a fan. So I definitely want to take on that question. And this is coming from, let's see here. This question is regarding, what's his name? Oh, I'm sorry.
David or Ben?
No, this is
just the two I see. Oh.
I want to say Giannis. I could be wrong. I could be pronouncing it wrong, but
you're up farther.
But he is. So this question comes all the way from Athens, Greece, which is cool. And he asked whether or not there has been any discussions between some kind of cross-Atlantic international cup or tournament between NWSL clubs and the FA clubs to help promote the professional women's game and increase global recognition of players and brands. I've heard, I don't want to say I've heard, like I've seen people kind of discuss that. Like it would be cool to have some type of tournament. I mean, I've thought about it too. Like, what if there was an international tournament like that where it's strictly NWSL clubs versus like FA, clubs, and what would that look like? What do you ladies think about that? And would that help grow the women's game even more?
Go on, you take this one, Alyse.
Sure. I think I'll speak for you. I think a lot of the appeal for players that come from the US and go play in Europe is Champions League. I mean, there's no way around it. It's a huge appeal for any players that choose to go play overseas as opposed to staying in the NWSL. So it's one thing that I think has definitely been on our minds, because we're just in an area where we don't really have that. We don't have, we're a very large geographic area. It's difficult. I mean, we have 6-hour flights just in our own league. So, it's very different than Europe, where you're very close together and can do these Champions League type events. But there is a cup, International Champions Cup, ICC, has been played in the US, where European teams have come over and played against NWSL teams. There's another cup coming this summer. So I think that's starting to be explored a little bit more. And I have no doubt that it's on all of our minds. Trust me, I know when we're talking about it internally in the NWSL and how we can, try to do more of these styles of tournaments. And I think it grows the game, the women's game as a whole. So I'm all for it if we can find out ways to, do it sustainably and financially sound. I think it's a tremendous opportunity.
So in the future, we could see Sky Blue versus Lewes.
Yeah, we're going to play Lewes. We're going there for preseason. We're going to have a bonfire. And
that would be so cool. Just make sure I get my invitation too, please, ladies. Don't forget me, don't forget me.
You're in.
Yeah, I think any of those kind of cross-Atlantic initiatives are always going to be good for the game. I think that having a few top American players in the WSL has been brilliant for the WSL's viewing figures and investment and revenue. And I think it's just part of that development, isn't it? It's also exciting for our players to have those players in their ranks, and hopefully vice versa as well. We're still in the championship, so I don't think we'd be part of those big international tournaments just yet. Just need to get promoted first. But we're definitely in for any pre-season friendly tours. Yeah, that'll be great. That'll be good fun.
Awesome. Well, that was a great question. Thank you so much, Eunice Coloris in Athens. And ladies, I mean, this has, been amazing, 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 amazing. Just some final words here. Once again, would love to thank the Athens Women's Football Summit crew. And also, we look forward to having more viewers with us in the upcoming webinars, and invite everyone to also join us for the upcoming third Athens International Conference of the Athens Women's Football Summit that will be held in Athens, Greece from October 4th to the 8th. It is also going to be virtual as well as in person. So definitely do visit the Athens Women's Football Summit website to check that out. And if you want to learn more information on that. And so, ladies, any last parting words before we wrap up?
I was scoping the comments in the sidebar. I was looking over there. Thanks, Natalia. She said Sky Blue helped an organization she's on the board of, so it's very cool. Thank you for sharing that. And hello, David, another local to me. Yeah, I think I want to, my parting words for today are actually that I'm admiring of both of you. I had a light say in who got to be on this panel. So, the first person I wanted to build it out with was Maggie. We've spoken before, but have never sat on a panel together. And even though I know you keep saying you're just in the championship, I look to Lewes FC. I think in terms of the way clubs build community, it doesn't matter which league you're in or if you're, top Division 1 status. I think that methods of building community can come from the smallest clubs to the biggest. So I look to Maggie and some of the things that Lewes has done, and it's actually changed my way of thinking around even some sponsors and things I'm looking to do, because you really have to step back and go, am I doing the right thing for the right reasons and with your community in mind in the best sense of it. So I have to, thank Maggie for that. And certainly Maggie Ntim, thank you for hosting so wonderfully today. We appreciate you as well. And I know you mentioned before about how, as you take on athletes, and this is one of the things I admired most about you, as you talked about when you take on professional athletes, you really holistically manage them. You talk about how they relate to nonprofits and some of the things that they really want to do. And I thought as an agent, this is refreshing to see that it's not just sign the contract and get the fee, but it seems like you really care about the athletes. And, that's a refreshing thing to have in the women's game right now.
No, thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, it's important. It's very important. We, the three of us here, and obviously everyone watching, we know there's so many opportunities in the women's football game, and we all have a part to play in it. And so that's why I'm here, and I'm grateful to you both for even just taking the time out to allow me to moderate and have this great conversation with you. And also thank you once again to Athens Women's Football Summit. Maggie, did you want to?
Maggie Murphy, your morning speech.
I say all that, and then I reached out to Alyse a little while ago, and part of me, it was because for a while, every so often something would pop up, and I would say to myself, what would Alyse do? And we'd never met. I don't think we had come into contact at that point. And so I asked someone to put me in contact, because I was like, I keep on thinking it, so why don't I just ask it? And so I've really appreciated that, and connecting all the dots together. One of the things I was so impressed by was your players' reactions to some of the events last summer, especially around the Black Lives Matter movement. And it just was really, I think that it's really powerful when players who are people first are backed so holistically by a club. So Maggie, it's great that I hear that you also have those values, because I think, like Alyse said, agents really need to make sure that that's front and center. So I applaud you for that. But yeah, I think that it all comes down to authenticity and what we're actually here to do. Are we here to say that we stand for certain things, or are we here to genuinely do it and genuinely try and move the dial and make this a really great environment and space and world for the people that we are ultimately kind of responsible for? So hats off to both of you, and thank you.
Can I plug for you, Maggie Murphy? My fangirl moment was when I listened to you on the Game Changers, I think that's what it's called, podcast. Yes. That was when I was like, oh, I need to know her. So I was glad you reached out, because I was like probably just sitting in the background kind of being fangirly. But that podcast was really eye-opening for me, and we did not get into your background a lot on this call, and I think people should, because You have a tremendously interesting background how you got to become a GM. So go listen to the Game Changers podcast with Maggie, everyone.
We'll figure out another way to get both of you women to share your background, because honestly, I think it's so inspiring, so impressive. I mean, obviously, Alyse, being that first GM, well, now being the only, female GM
it's
in
a
the
sad
NWSL.
stat. I hate that stat.
Right.
I don't want to have
and
it.
It's something that, I feel like people need to know. More people need to know who you are, what you've done, what you're doing. The same thing with you, Maggie. Women need to know, because, there are opportunities for women to say, okay, I can be a GM. And by just watching this conversation here, they can say, okay, I have the option to be a GM if I'm in England. I have the option to be a GM if I'm in the US, or I see Maggie and Tim and I have the option to be an agent, in America or just wherever. And that's the goal. And especially for Women's History Month. I mean, I just applaud you ladies, and please, I just ask that you continue to do what you're doing and just always extend that hand so that more women know that, okay, these are two great women that we can look up to. They're not just resourceful and connected, but they're also about the community. They're about their players, and so that helps an agent like me know that, okay, these are GMs that really do care. It's not just about, oh, let's just sign this player because there's 5 million followers on Instagram or something like that, but it's actually taking the time to develop the player and also just build a great club around that. And so once again, I applaud you ladies. I thank you so much for the opportunity. Once again, Athens Women's Football Summit. I thank you guys, Mario, Sulu, the whole team. We really thank you guys. And a happy Women's History Month to all of the wonderful ladies, even the ones that are tuning in, the ones that can't tune in. And I'm excited. I'm excited to see what's to come from both of your clubs. I'm always watching, so I'm excited.
Cool. Thanks, Maggie.
I'm excited. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us. And please continue to, for starters, before we wrap up, where can everyone find you both?
Twitter is probably my place. I don't understand Instagram.
No, you gotta find you at the dripping pan.
Yeah, come, become an owner, get involved. But yeah, come along to the grounds, especially when we can have fans back. That'll be great. Perfect.
And Alyse?
Yep. I'm at LaHue, very original. I am not on the TikTok, so everywhere else at LaHue. You can find me on the Twitters and the Instagriddle.
Perfect. Yes, I too am on Twitter. Pretty active, if I must say, certain times.
You are Maggie. I see you on there all the time.
Pretty active. I'm Agent Maggie Ntim on Twitter, Maggie.Ntim on Instagram, and definitely please do follow Athens Women's Football Summit. It's going to be AthensWFS at Twitter as well as on Instagram. And once again, we thank you guys for tuning in, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your day and have a great weekend and enjoy the rest of Women's History Month. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.